Perfect. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Jean-Francois. I'm looking forward to understanding how 145 works, because I'm sure I can learn a few things. And for all our residents, after we understand how the website works, we will go through the EPAs one by one. Hopefully it will not take too long, so that we can familiarize ourselves with them and you can find them less intimidating.
Great. So just to be sure, was Carlos, were you presenting anything, or we'll just focus, we'll start with 145 right away?
Oh, no, JF, today the floor is all yours, because we already had a presentation with the residents, and
Perfect.
They are really eager to know how to work, how to operate
right.
145. So no, the floor is all yours, JF.
Perfect. So what I'm going to do is I have multiple screens, so but I might be focusing on the 145 screen on my side, which means that if anybody posts a question on the chat, if Carlos, Dr. Gitulescu, or maybe Sheila can just stop me at any point,
Don't worry,
I can answer.
Don't worry, we will be keeping an eye on that.
Perfect. All right. So hello, everybody. My name is Jean-Francois Gravel. I'm a manager of the Medical Education Systems team. So we do support 145, but 145 is a system designed and managed by the 145 company in Vancouver. So just to make things clear, I'm a McGill employee and I don't work for 145. So so what I'm going to do is I'll first start by sharing my screen, and I'll show you some, of course, I'll show it to you from a resident perspective, but I might also go through sending an EPA as you. Then I'll switch my profile to an attending's profile, so you see what it looks like and how they receive it. And as well, I'll come back on the resident side as well. So right now, what you see is a test resident profile. If you log on to your own 145, you'll have something similar. You might already have some forms to complete. By now, since you're just about to, or may have already started the period 2, then you might have already completed some forms there. So with 145, what you see is what you get. So if you have access, and you know what I'm going to do, because right now I just noticed that I have some other functionalities showing up that you don't have access to, since I'm an administrator. So I'm going to give you the full view from a resident perspective. So when you log on, this is the view that you're gonna get. In this case, don't worry about this when it says like geriatrics PGY1, because this is our test account, so we have it internal to multiple programs, and what you're going to see, for example, if you log on, then you're going to have your own program in here, and so it won't say surgical foundations, but your home surgical subspecialty will be highlighted. So whether it's gen surg or urology or whatnot. So and your PGY1, which is the same thing as an R1. So PGY stands for post-grad year, and that's the standard that's available on 145. So right from the start at the top, you'll have your to-dos, and the number of to-dos are either the forms to complete or anything that you have to take action on. And in this case, you'll notice that in the results, so the results are, of course, all the completed forms that you have access to or should have access to, and it's the result of each. So when you see something like this, you can simply click on the name of the evaluator. You'll access the actual form, you can review it, and at the bottom you have some questions to answer. So it says, please answer the following questions, as doing so will facilitate the feedback process. Did you receive verbal feedback, yes or no? I'm going to say yes. Are you in agreement with this assessment? In this case, I'm going to say yes. I do want to point out that if you select, well, actually, you know what, let me select no. If I select no, and I add some comments here, just to say what you think of this evaluation, or if you're in a disagreement with this evaluation, please note that this does not trigger a revision process at the teaching office level. If you want to challenge an evaluation, there is a process that has to be done outside of the tool. And I believe it's described on the PGME website in one of the procedures. So just know that you can say that you disagree and add comments, but this is not the official way to provide feedback on that. And when you click on submit, you're confirming that you have seen the results, not that you agree with it. It's maybe semantics. I'm not sure how you would call that, but basically when you do this, at least you can remove it from your to-dos, and it takes a while for it to refresh, but the results will go down from 65 to 64 because what you've done is by clicking submit and answering those questions, you remove it from your to-dos. So that means that you've seen the results, and then the evaluations are afterwards available under the evaluations menu on the left side. And when you go here, you'll have, of course, the name of the rotation. In this case here, if ever you see CBME unscheduled, it would mean that an EPA was triggered or was sent while you were not scheduled on any rotation. So chances are we've done this. Some of those were triggered on a test resident, so that's why. But in general, what will happen is you'll see the rotation that you were in when you receive the evaluation. So if I hover above the name of the resident, then you know, I can see the name of the farm, and of course, what will be happening in this view is you'll see both EPAs listed here as well as IDERs. So you will be able to see your IDERs, which are an assessment form that is assessing you in the context of a rotation, right? So over a period of time, whereas EPAs, as you know, is for a specific activity or a specific event. So you can scroll through this, and you'll also see the date that it was completed by the attending, or by the senior resident. In some contexts, it's possible that an EPA will be completed by a senior resident. And as well as if you confirm that it was seen, like before when I clicked on this one, so I said, yep, I'm okay with it, or I've seen it, and it shows that it was seen on a specific date. So if I go back to the to-do section, and of course, you can always explore this section. If you want, you can also click on the help link at the bottom left, and this would bring you to the official 145 knowledge base, and you can search through that as well. So you'll notice some sections. If you click on handouts and links, in this case, of course, because this is a test account, you'll see stuff from multiple programs. But let's say if you're part of the cardiac surgery program, you'll have those showing, and you'll have also surgical foundations. And I don't know if it's too small for you to see. Definitely too small for my young eyes. So surgical foundations, you can have program objects and rotation objects. So a program object is any kind of document that your program admin or your program director um, makes available via 145, and so it's not rotation specific or site specific, but it's possible that if you go by rotation, then if you do emergency medicine at the general, then there are some specific goals and objectives that are listed, and basic information and request deadlines specifically for that rotation. If you look at Gen Surge at the general, you also have that. And few programs use that, but it's possible that you might see also site objects, because there might be, let's say, if you go to the Jewish General Hospital and there's something specific about parking, well, then that would be applicable to all rotations happening at the Jewish, and a program may decide to share that information on well, specifically for that site. So you can go through that, and what's going to happen often is if you do a rotation, even if it's not part of your program, but if it's in an elective or something off service, then you are likely going to see some information provided by that program, so you can look through that information as well. So it's I'd say that it's important to at least take a look here when you start a new period, when you start a new rotation, just to see what information is available. Might actually be good to look at it before it starts. Now, procedure, patient and procedure logs. So this is not available in all programs. Some surgical programs use other tools for logs, and I have a feeling that things will be moving quite a bit, because there's a need for specific for surgery specific logs, and so there might be some evolution coming this way, especially in the context of 145. But right now, not all surgical subspecialties use 145 for their logs. But just know that it's there. Here, the marks option is not used. I don't believe that it's used by any of the surgical programs, but you don't have to worry. And here you do have the report center, which will be key for your own self-management of the competency by design, so CBD or competency-based medical education. So in this case, what I'll do is when we look at the EPAs, and after we look at the how-to, so how to send an EPA, we'll go through the different reports that you can have access to, and that you should use to follow your own progression on that. So in the past, what I used to say in those events is I would say the most important person during your residency program is not the program director. So I apologize, Dr. Gizulescu, about this statement. So the most important person is your program admin. So you have Sheila, that's going to be.
I agree.
Okay. Phew. So Sheila does a lot of work for you guys. She takes care of the scheduling, and I hope that you do things in a timely fashion when she asks, because it's a real pain in the butt for her and for Dr. Gitulescu also, if they both have to follow up after you to make sure that you complete your evaluation of rotation and that you fill out your assessment of clinical teaching where you evaluate your attending. It's as important for you to do these. So when, and in this case, so you don't have any in these to-dos to show, but if you log on to your own to-dos, I'm sure you've already seen those few forms. So it's as important for you to complete these in a timely manner as it is for an attending to evaluate you. And you'll, at some point, you'll understand the frustration because there are some staff that do need some reminders. And at the same time, if you can't reach a staff to ask him or her to fill out an evaluation form, then Sheila is your ally in this process. But just know that you do have the ability to manage that yourself and to see if the forms have been completed or not. So if I go into, or I should say, if there's any questions, feel free to either interrupt me, unmute yourself and ask a question, or type it in the chat. So far, so good. All right. So we'll just demonstrate just how to send an EPA. And by default, you'll see the section at the top of your to-dos where it says choose a scenario. So at your level as junior residents, you will always or only select, I want someone to assess me. But eventually, when you become a senior resident or at least a resident with a bit more experience, you'll be able to assess a learner, and that's when you'll be able to choose the option to assess a fellow learner, and then choose the evaluation form or the EPA here. So if I want to trigger an EPA, and I'm going to, and once again, here, because this is our test account, you'll see EPAs from all kinds of discipline, all kinds of programs. But in this case, what you should see are EPAs from two programs, Surgical Foundations and your home program for your surgical subspecialty. So if I scroll down and look for,
I'm gonna just say one thing.
Yes,
Not all
please.
residents are lucky enough to have EPAs in their own program. Some programs haven't started yet.
It's true. So I guess in that case, so that's a really good point. Thank you for that. So that means that in that case, you will only have, those residents would only have EPAs for Surgical Foundations. So if I scroll down, so for example, so if you want to send an EPA 1.4, you would select it, click on send form. Then you see here, if you want to select the name of an attending or of a senior or more senior resident. In this case, I'm just going to search test. And so if I scroll down and I use the test attending profile, you click continue to step 2. So by default, you always see today's date. If you have the ability to go back and choose a previous date, now just so you know, in the system now we have a pre-configured expiration date on an EPA after it's triggered, and an EPA must be completed by the attending or a senior resident within 21 days. So basically within 3 weeks, an EPA must be completed or else it gets automatically deleted or removed from the system because it's deemed that if it's done 3 weeks later, chances are the value of the assessment itself may not be as good. So in this case, if you say that you forgot to send an EPA on July 1st, then I'd say that's probably up to your own program. So I don't know if there's a maximum of time that Surgical Foundations allow to go kind of in the past. But let's say you forgot to send an EPA yesterday, so you could choose yesterday's date and then click on send form. So what's going to happen is then, so automatically the EPA is received in the account of the attending, and there's an email notification that is done. So the attendings now have the ability to use the 145 mobile app. Right now, the mobile app doesn't allow you as a resident to trigger or to send an EPA, but this is coming quite fast. So the good news is this morning I was on a call with the vendor 145, and they showed us the there is currently a mobile app, but what they're working on is a mobile friendly site. So if you use your browser to access it, it has the same look and feel as a mobile app, and it's much easier to navigate and to view than the current mobile app, which is not good. So you can still use it. You can install the app. I've used it on an iOS device, never used it on an Android device, but you can give it a try. But just know that there's some really nice features that are coming up in the next few weeks. So if I look at the bottom, so let's say that this is the one that you had sent. So, but this is of course, in this case, EPA 1.1, but that's something that I sent earlier today just to show you. These would be the results. So you're able to see, if you click here, you can access the result of the EPA, and you can go through this. So another feature as well that currently is not available is the pre-fill option. So in each EPA, you have some fields that have to be selected. So type of observation, or sometimes you have different other fields that have to be filled out to explain what is the context of that specific EPA. So it's possible that you'll need to send an email if you're not with the staff when he or she is filling out the EPA. You may need to send an email with some information to say, oh, this was this context, and it was in the OR, or it was in the emergency room, or anyway, to basically describe what was the context of that specific EPA, so that the attending can fill out these information. So you can see these are the milestones. So the milestones are not mandatory to complete. So it is possible that sometimes some staff will not fill some of those, but if they do, then you'll see the information. And of course, the overall assessment is mandatory, right? So it's whether I had to talk them through, I needed to prompt, and what would be considered as passing grade, I guess. I don't like to use that term, but it's I needed to be there just in case, or I didn't need to be there, and those would be kind of achieved. So you can find some comments, some narrative feedback in here, and the evaluator has to say if there was any issues with professionalism or with patient safety, and whether or not they gave feedback at the end of. So in this case, it says rotation. We still need to tweak it. We need to change the wording here, but basically it'll be the same. So did you give feedback as a staff to the resident?
I'd like to just intervene here.
Yeah.
So as you said, the for an EPA to count, for that observation to count, the resident must be rated as I needed to be there just in case, or I didn't need to be there. So that's 4 or 5 out of 5. If the evaluation is I needed to prompt like here, then this observation of DPA doesn't count. So you'll see that some EPAs require, most EPAs require more than one observation. So one iteration of DPA to be filled out. So if you get, I needed to prompt, then it doesn't count. And the idea is that you progress and you learn, and then eventually you reach that competency. And the comments, I can tell you that the competence committee looks at the comments that are written. So when you're going to start to fill these out as R3s, 4 or 5s, which is far from now, I know for you, the comments matter a lot. And when you look at the EPAs that were completed on you, that's also very important, the comments. That's where you're going to get your very constructive feedback.
Thank you for that. And I can say, adding some comments and some useful comments. In the past, it was a challenge, let's say, to get good comments from the staff, maybe more in the context of IDERs, where they felt that they provided a lot of verbal feedback, didn't always, and I don't mean to overgeneralize, but what I've seen, at least right now, since the start of CBD, is I find that the staff have been, how do you say, sensibilisés to provide good feedback. And I think now the message has been received, and you do get more and more useful feedback on that side. So just like I did earlier, so you can answer those questions. Now just whoops. Okay, so I'm going to click on cancel because I do see that time is flying by. So in link to the EPAs, I want to bring you to the report center and to show you what is available for you to manage your own progression on competency by design. So what you can do is, and you can actually just play around some of these. Assessment count per competency or EPA is not really useful. So let's start with competency or EPA summary report. When you get there, by default, you'll have the whole academic year, the dates of the whole academic year. So you can leave it like that if you want, or narrow it down if you want. So in this drop down, when you say include assessment of, again, I apologize for the long list. If I scroll down to surgical foundation, so it's the same thing. So either you'll see only surgical foundations, or surgical foundations and, let's say, urology or your home program. You have an option to choose between all the stages under surgical foundations, or to go stage by stage. So if right now you have not yet started to trigger and be assessed for any of the stage 2 EPAs, then it would give you the same option, whether you choose the overall EPAs or just stage 1. So I'm going to choose stage 1 here, click on view report. Going to take a few seconds to generate, and here what is good is you can see where you're at for each of the EPAs. So of course now I just showed you, or I just created a few EPAs earlier today. and you can see where you're at. So this is, there was only one EPA, you got one EPA at this level, two EPAs where you got a 4, and one EPA where you got a 5. The trajectory summary allows you to see what happened. So you started with a 5, then on with a 4, 3, and then, of course, this might not be representative. So I just, these are just examples. What is good about this is if you want to go deeper into the assessment and you want to get information and feedback at the milestone level, you can actually click on it to get more information. So either you can see the narrative feedback specifically for that, and if you want to see the details, you can click on View Assessment, and that opens up the actual form, the EPA, and you can see the whole form itself. So, and if you want to see the narrative feedback, you'll see that, for example, this is the same date. It doesn't say what it is, but you'll see that. So the first line is always the positive comment, and the second line is the things to improve. So you'll that's why. So it's not a duplication. It's just the fact that the way that McGill designed it, it has the what you did well and what to improve. It's just that there was no way for us to add the question name in this view specifically. Now, if I go back to Report Center, and so we can go to EPA Achievement Report. And again, as I said earlier, I do recommend that you go there and you experiment. And I bet you that most of you are currently doing the same thing on your computers right now. So here it's interesting because you'll see where you're at. You can see your progression for each of the EPA. So in this case, you required only one EPA with a 4 or a 5 for it to be marked as complete. So this shows that you meet 100% of the criteria or the requirements, and then you can see whether there's some that are pending, meaning that have not yet been evaluated or completed, but have been sent. This one shows that 4 has been completed and 3 have been completed with an overall score of 4 or 5. So what you'll see is if you have a progress, you'll see the progress in blue when it hasn't reached 100%. And right now, this EPA still hasn't been marked as complete by the competency committee. But eventually, so even though it says that you meet 100% of the criteria, the competency committee still has to go in and mark those EPAs as achieved. And so I don't remember what is the frequency for surgical foundations, but I know that there's at least 4 times a year where the committee has to meet, and I think that's about it on this board. And yeah, if Carlos or Dr. Gitulescu, if you have anything to add, don't hesitate. So another thing that could be good for you is when you click on EPA status report, and we'll go to so I chose surgical foundations. In this case, you have the list of stage 1 EPAs, and you can see that's another view to say, so how many are required, how many EPAs with a score of 4 or 5 have been completed. So if you just want an overview of your progression, that's one place where you could go to see this. You can also export it to Excel if you're interested. And let me go back to Report Center. EPA details report. So yes, so you can also do a report where if you want to focus only on narrative feedback. Maybe I'll just show it briefly. And so actually, let me just use. I did another session with PEDS Gen Surge yesterday. So let me just use that. So we might get a different perspective on that. So here, yeah. So you'll see. Personally, I am not sure if it's useful as a resident to just focus on the narrative feedback, but there might be a reason for it. But at least you do have access to it. I've seen more that in the context of competency committee that the members of that committee use that option. And I think the last one that I'll show is well, there's EPA detailed report. Maybe okay, I'll show two last one. Okay, this is when you go into it. With the time, I won't show this one, but play around. So if you want to see the information, so you can say you want to see all the EPAs that have received a score of 4 or 5, and we're going to go search for foundation. Yeah, so if you want to run the report, then you can go through and see. Ça c'est 1.2, right? So I think 1.1 is going to be at the bottom. So right. So this is the kind of report that you can see. Again, from a resident perspective, I'm not sure if it's useful, but basically it's there for you, and you can choose whether you want to use it or not. And the last one that I'm going to show is the trajectory summary report, which gives you an interesting overview of of the trajectory of multiple EPAs. So if I look at this one, right, so in this case, I have to remember under which program did I try?
So Jeff, if
yeah.
In the meantime, and as you are looking for the report that you want to show, I just want to remind the residents that all the information that is being collected using these EPAs is available only to you. I mean, there is no access for any of your colleagues to all this information. The only a group of people who would have access to the EPA information are the members of the competence committee. So I think that's something that is important for you to remember. The other thing that I want to also to mention is that this information it's kind of updated live. That means that if you complete, I don't know, in one given day, say 2 EPAs or 3 EPAs, after the end of the day or at the end of the day, when all those 3 EPAs have been completed, you can see what was the assessment on those EPAs. So there is not a period of time that you have to wait, say like a week or 2 days or anything like that, because the information is constantly being updated in the system, and you will be able to use all these report kind of options to track your own progression.
I have a question. Is a resident, what's the word? Does the resident receive an email notification every time an EPA is completed?
So there's no email notification. Although if you, so that you might have a daily notification if results have been received, but not every time. So usually there's for that kind of notification is once a day. So if you receive multiple results in one day, or if multiple forms have been completed on a specific day, you'll only receive one form, but you can always, whenever you access your to-dos, or whenever a resident connects to 145, he or she can see in the results section which one have been completed. So right now, so unfortunately I can't find an example with multiple lines, and I'm just trying to find on the knowledge base an example. But so imagine in this case, and I'm sure you guys are good, you can imagine lots of stuff. So imagine multiple lines. If you have multiple EPAs, so each EPA form will have a different color, and you can see the same kind of graph, but everything on the same graph. So you can choose, you can have the option at the bottom to click and select which EPA progression you want to see. So any questions? So far, so good. C'est bon. So Dr. Gitulescu, is there anything else you'd like me to cover or to look at?
I don't think so. If our residents have no questions, then I think that's it.
Okay, perfect. What I'll
do is... I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, regarding duty hours, do we have to register them or no need?
It's a good question. So at McGill, we don't manage the duty hours through 145. It's just that, so the option is still available there, but it's not being managed through that. And one of the reasons that I was given, just to explain from a historical perspective, is the fact that it's not just one hospital. So there's the MUHC, St. Mary's Hospital, Jewish, different hospitals that are part of the McGill network and related to McGill or affiliated with McGill, and so the duty hours is managed differently in different by different hospitals. So at least that was the context. You do have vacation and leave in there, and so that's usually your program admins who would be entering the information on the vacation and leave. If you have a sick day, if those kinds of things. If you have study days as well, and if ever you're sick for more than 13 days, then it becomes prolonged sickness. I can't remember how it's called, but then that's managed by the PGME office. So that's managed centrally, and they're the one who would be entering that information. But basically, you just need to go to Sheila and just make sure you know what's Sheila's favorite chocolate, as well as if she prefer white wine or red wine. That's always very useful. Even for the program director, you know, it's important. Those are the two very important people. You don't need to know what I drink, nor what Carlos drink. We drink anything.
Anything. So I don't think that Surgical Foundation uses this this platform for vacation and leave. management. So I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay,
but the wine and the
perfect.
chocolate, sure, yes.
Perfect. So it is possible that some, like your home program, may manage this through vacation, through this option. So it might be the program admin of your surgical subspecialty that will manage that.
Yeah, and what about procedure logs? Can I procedure there? Maybe, sorry, I came late, so maybe you already mentioned it before.
No problem. It's always good to refresh people's memory on this. So procedure logs depends on which program you're in. So some I think that some programs use TRES for logs, which is a completely different application and system. And so eventually, more programs may start using 145. But at this point, I would verify with your own programs just to be sure.
Yes, Surgical Foundations doesn't ask you to put in your procedure logs in here. So it's whatever your home program asks you to do. That's what you do.
Question, is there an easy way to look at all the EPAs that you have to fulfill?
That's a good question on this side. So if you want to have the EPAs, if you want to view like the forms themselves, or just the list of EPAs?
I think she probably wants to see a summary, like a visual,
yeah, like a list
summary.
Yeah,
Okay.
A list of all the EPAs.
So what you could do is, if you go into the report center, and if you go into kind of the generic EPA status report, so just from that perspective. So I'm going to scroll down to Surgical Foundation EPA, so overall. And if I run the report, then you'll see these are all the EPAs that you have to complete. So this would give you kind of an overview of how many have been completed, how many are pending. That's the example that I sent earlier. So I sent it to the test attending, and that attending hasn't filled it out yet, so it shows as pending. Those are completed. So I think this would give you the overall list of EPAs, and then you can of course switch back, go to EPA status report again, and then choose your own. So let's say you want to know urology stage 1, the list of EPAs. If you run the report, you'll see how many EPAs are there. Now, I know that some programs, what they did is, under handouts and links, they made the EPA, the list of EPAs available, so the whole form, so you can see all the different milestones. Also, I know that on the Royal College website, so I wouldn't know how to direct you to it, but all the milestones, all that information is available. So you can always check with your program admin of your home program to see where or if the full list of EPAs with more information is available.
We can also talk about that in the next hour.
And if you don't mind, I'll just share. So what I'll do is actually so if you go to your chat, I'll post, this is a knowledge-based article where you can see, as a learner, how do I see a trajectory of my performance on an EPA or competency. And if you click on that, and what I can do is just to give you a quick overview. So this is what I meant when you see the trajectory, so you can see this for multiple EPAs, and if you have like 10 EPAs, of course there'll all be different colors, but it was just to give you an overview of that option. And that's it for me. Any other questions?
I have a question, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm. Yes, please go ahead. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, this is more of a core question actually related to the EPAs themselves.
Okay.
So I'm looking, and say, for example, transition to discipline EPA #1, and then says performing pre-op preparation. Below that, you see that there's some milestones, TDME 1.61. So when I send an EPA to one of my supervisors, are they required to fill out each and every one of those milestones, or is it just one generic form, or just describing? I would like to look at and see what the supervisor will actually fill out, so I can have an idea of what I need to achieve.
So can the residents see the blank form evaluation forms for the EPAs?
No, so that's the thing where the residents don't have access to it through 145, the same way that you as program director or Sheila as program admin can view the blank form. So one option would be for Sheila to share the PDF version of those and make them available through the handout and links option that I showed earlier. So and Sheila, if ever you need help with that feature, just send me an email, and either myself or Liz can help you to set that up. So that would be one way to see this.
So I have a question. I'm going to use a PDF form of a PDF version of the description of all the EPAs. I'm going to be sharing my screen when we're going to go through each EPA.
Oh, okay.
So my question to you, Jean-François, is
Yeah.
Does each milestone on that description form, does it correspond to something to be evaluated? It seems to me that,
so
yes, okay.
Yeah, so all the milestones are on the on each of the EPA forms. So whatever is on that overall document description. So the equivalent has been
created
on each of the forms. Yeah.
Okay, so then I can we'll get Sheila to email everyone the PDF of the description, but I'm going to share my screen with you and you will see it because that's exactly what we're going to do next.
Oh, perfect. So that's actually, I find that specific document is easier to look at to better understand. It's easier than looking at the form themselves.
Okay, does anyone have any more questions for Jean-François? Okay.
So don't hesitate. So what I would suggest is if you have any issues with 145, reach out to Sheila just as a first step. And if you have any like technical issues, you can always send an email to 145.med@mcgill.ca. This will open a ticket that we'll receive, and myself or one of my colleagues will answer it as quickly as possible. But start with Sheila first because she knows a lot, and then and then also there's the help file. So if you look at the bottom left, click on help, and the knowledge base has lots of different procedures and information.
Okay, thank you so much.
Perfect. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, so hello again, everyone. I don't know if anyone feels they need a break. Fernanda just joined, but we can still take a break if you would like, even if it's 5 minutes. Just let me know, please. Or the alternative is to get started and see how fast we can go through this. And if it looks like it's taking a while and everybody needs a break, we can break in a little bit of time. So if I don't hear anybody protest, I'm going to continue. Okay, so I hear nobody. So first of all, I wanted to take a few minutes because I think we have maximum attendance right now. I'm very happy to see so many of you are here during this first the first day of the academic half-day curriculum. There's a funny sound. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about boot camp. It's ended last week, and I wanted to remind everybody, as I mentioned in the email that I sent, that it was very busy, and we did not expect it to be so busy. When we made up the schedule, we expected to have fewer sessions, but FCCS was added at the last minute, and it was added with a lot of hours. So we know that it was a lot, and we know that it may have been overwhelming to be on a clinical rotation and be in boot camp. If we had known it was going to turn out this way, we wouldn't have put you on clinical rotations, I think. And I know that some of you had call duties and others didn't. And I'm very upset about that because I didn't think things were going to turn out that way. So I acknowledge that not everybody had an equal opportunity to attend bootcamp sessions. We said that they're recorded, but it's not the same thing. When there's a lot to catch up on, it's hard to sit and listen and there's no interaction. So I acknowledge that. I take that as part of the feedback for next year. We don't know what next year is going to look like. I won't be the program director next year. Dr. Vasilio is coming back, but I will certainly share with her how this year went. So I'm acknowledging that, but aside from that issue, we really want and need your feedback. And there will be 3 ways for you to provide us with feedback from bootcamp. One is right now, you can tell me verbally. Another one is to email Sheila, and Sheila's very good at not letting me know who says what. So that would be anonymous for me to know. And then the last thing is that, Sheila, we will make up one document that we're going to ask you to fill out with specific feedback for each session. It's not going to be onerous, and feedback about the overall organization of bootcamp. It's extremely valuable, and the instructors and the speakers and the presenters use the feedback they received last year to tailor this year's presentations. You don't know how much the program reacts to the feedback and pays attention to it. So please remember that. Keep that in the back of your minds. What you say matters a lot, and most often people will act on what you say. So with that being said, do you have anything that you would like to say about bootcamp? And it can be good, it can be bad. It's not taken as a criticism, but as constructive feedback. Not all at once, please. Okay, I'm not sure how to interpret the silence. Maybe
I guess,
okay, please.
If I could say something, I really appreciated the format of the surgical foundations, and I get that with Zoom it was a bit harder to do certain types of sessions. I know that for myself, going into surgical foundations, I had hoped that we would get maybe a bit more hands-on, or even just like something as simple as like having a suture kit that we could do following along with like a live session, so that we could have knots and sutures kind of ready to go by the time we hit the floor. Another thing would be like good contact with the programs to like lay out expectations as for students in regards to surgical foundations, and making sure that they understand that there's time given for surgical foundations and kind of the burden that is expected for us. But overall, I get that COVID made it so that it was hard to adjust, but I think you guys did a good job overall.
Thank you. You gave me a good idea about the live sessions and the suture kits. So we didn't schedule those sessions, which normally are part of bootcamp and are quite popular, right? Because the Sim Center was not open, and we didn't know. It opened, I think, in the month of July, but while bootcamp was going on. So the plan is to schedule some of those sessions. We would have to find the time and see what the limitations are in terms of how large the groups can be, and do we need to split the group and into how many smaller groups. So we need to figure that out, but that's definitely planned. I also thought about doing a session where I demonstrate something online, but I hadn't thought about you guys having suture kits at home. And if we can somehow figure that out, I think that would be great. The only problem is that I wouldn't be able to give you feedback unless you're willing to share your screen. So we can try to do that. But, you know, if we can be a group of 6 and wear masks and be at a small distance, it can still work in person. We just have to figure out the logistics of it. But again, that is in the plans. Maybe not as early as you would have liked it in your training, but it will happen. The better contact with the programs, yes, that certainly could be improved, although I thought we were pretty clear, but yes, we can be even clearer. Does anyone else have anything else to add? Okay, so look, if you have anything else to say, there are other modalities to say it. Going forward, just as a little recap of what's going to happen next. So FCCS, I understand that you all wrote the exam, and if you all pass, then you will all be certified. For the ATLS, there will be the day-and-a-half session, August 10th and 11th, where hopefully all of you who don't have ATLS certification yet will get certified. The one thing about that is that some of the EPAs, and you'll see later which ones, not that many, could be completed as part of ATLS. And I don't know how it went last year, if the ATLS instructors can be asked to fill out the EPA forms or automatically they get done. I need to figure that out, but we'll help you get some EPAs done during the ATLS course. As for ACLS, about half of you, I believe, are certified and the other half are not. We need to find out when the exam can be scheduled at the simulation center, and then depending on that, we will send you the materials to review, and I think it's less onerous than FCCS and ATLS. And the last thing is the FUSE program, which is Fundamental Use of Surgical Energy. We're going to schedule that. So what you have to do there is review online material. It takes about 2 or 3 hours. And then you have to schedule an exam in person at the Montreal General Hospital. And that's not going to be done all together. It's going to be done 2 or 3 individuals at a time. So we'll send out instructions when we can start working on that. But I think you've been dealing with a lot of material online and a lot of exams and things. So I think we're going to wait a little bit until the fall for this to start happening. I think you've been overwhelmed enough with a lot of material. So this is what's being planned. The other sessions that were part of bootcamp were sessions with someone named Kate Bly, who did a lot of the softer topics like communication, collaboration, being sensitive to cultural issues, and dealing with stress and well-being and all that kind of stuff, which is very important. But some of those sessions, as I mentioned at the orientation, some of those sessions are better done in person. So we didn't feel that we should put them in bootcamp, but we will try to figure out a way to schedule at least some of them throughout the year. And if there's anything in particular that you think you need, then please let us know. Like I said before, we want your feedback. We want to do what you need us to do. So with that being said, let's talk about EPAs. So I'm gonna try to figure out, I've done it before, how to share my screen. Share content, okay. Does everyone see the EPA document?
I can see it.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, about the EPAs. So this is the document that Sheila can send to all of you. There are many EPAs, and an EPA is one such document, and each EPA needs a certain number of observations to be filled out for someone to be considered that they've completed this EPA. Some of them have 1 observation, and most of them have more than 1. I'm trying to do something else at the same time, I'm sorry. And in each EPA, you see the relevant milestones. So let's look through this document. I don't know if I have a pointer. I don't have a pointer. So at the top, you see the key features that describes the EPA. The assessment plan tells you how this is assessed, by whom, and whether it's direct or indirect observation, or sometimes by simulation. Use form 1, I don't know what that means. I think there's mostly 1 form for each EPA. And then one of the important pieces of information here is how many observations. So here it says collect 1 observation of achievement. So with the grade of 4 or 5, so needed to be there just in case or didn't need to be there. And then each of these milestones will be evaluated on the evaluation form. Not all of these need to be filled out. There is one the evaluator can pick could not judge or did not observe. So you don't need to worry about all of these being filled out. This gives you an idea of what's important in the EPA, but to be honest, I sit on the competence committee and we don't look to see how many of these have been filled out. Obviously, if all of them are could not judge, then you can't say that someone passed this EPA, but as I mentioned before, we look at the comments. The comments I think are very informative. So this EPA has to do with performing the pre-op preparation of patients for basic surgical procedures. So this is part of the transition to discipline, and you need one observation. So on which rotations can this be filled out? Obviously on rotations where there will be surgical procedures. So any service that has inpatient surgical patients, so in all the subspecialties in surgical foundations that happens, a lot of you will be on the trauma rotation. It may not be the best, the easiest setting in which to fill this out because there aren't many basic surgical procedures done on the trauma rotation. And often patients go to the OR quickly on an urgent basis. Obviously in the ICU or doing radiology rotations or cardiology consults, for example, because I know some of you do that, this EPA would not be feasible there. So anywhere where you can do surgery on basic surgical procedures, that's where you would do the CPA. So this is how I plan to look at each EPA. Does this work for you guys? Does this help understand what we're dealing with? Okay, okay, good. Thank you, Catherine. All right, so EPA number 2 is recognizing and initiating early management for critically ill surgical patients. And you need 2 observations of this. And one of it can be done in simulation or clinically. So I don't know if it can be done during ATLS. This is one question we're gonna have. If some of these EPAs can be done at the ATLS day and you need to have the forms filled out, we're going to send you a reminder to print out a couple of these evaluation forms and bring them with you. Normally, we like to have these filled out electronically, but I think that to ask an ATLS instructor to log in and to look for a particular resident name and a particular form may be onerous. And I think if they're presented with a paper form with your name already filled out with the date, I think it will be much easier. So out of respect and courtesy for them, I think we will accept the paper forms for sure. So we just need to get them done as much as possible. So this form obviously would be filled out on a trauma rotation, on an ICU rotation, and on those surgical subspecialty rotations where there are critically ill patients. So maybe in urology or plastics, there will not be much opportunity to do this, but on a rotation like general surgery, where a very ill patient can come in septic shock to the emergency room with perforated bowel, that could be a very good opportunity to do so. So you have to use your judgment a little bit. I'm not going to list all the rotations where there will be critically ill patients, but within surgery, but I think you can understand how this could work. And you need two observations. In general, in the transition to discipline EPAs, you don't need to fill out that many. So I think it's an easier step to get through. And that's why we like to say that we aim for you guys to fill them out in the first 4 months of this year. But if that doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world, as long as you fill them out and you get what you need out of them. So the transition to discipline number 3, EPA, documenting clinical encounters. So this is easier to do, I think. You need 2 observations, one from an inpatient, one from an outpatient. So the inpatient ones can be filled out on any surgical inpatient rotation. And the outpatient, anytime you go to a clinic, you can fill it out on any rotation where there are clinics. I don't know if an ER visit counts as an outpatient. I believe not. I believe that would fall under inpatient. So that's about that EPA. The next one is handover. Handover cannot be done during simulation. You need 2 observations. This is the sign over or sign out. So when you're on a service where you have inpatients and you sign out to the resident who's on call that night, then that's when this you do. So you can do it in the ICU, on the trauma service, any surgical rotation where you have inpatients. Even on a consult service, you could do it if you have patients that you follow. And I should add that, and I mentioned this before, the individuals who can fill out the EPAs are senior residents. So R3, 4, 5, or 6 or 7, fellows and attendings. Not an R2, not an R1, and not a medical student, unless we're talking about the EPA, about the last one we're going to mention, where you supervise junior trainees. Then they're allowed to fill them out, but not otherwise. The EPA number 5, demonstrating the ability to function in the operating room. So obviously, you can only do this on a rotation where you're going to be in the operating room, not in the ICU. On trauma, because of the nature of what happens when we go to the OR in trauma, it's usually very busy. Someone may have the opportunity to observe your performance and document it later, but you need to use your judgment. There's only 1 observation needed, and it can be done in simulation too. I guess, I don't know how much, I don't know if we'll be able to arrange simulation as much as in previous years, covering all the clinical scenarios. So I would not count on simulation for this. In general, I would tell you that if you have the opportunity to do it in a clinical setting, for most of these EPAs, you should take that opportunity to do it. So that's it for that one. Am I going too fast? Wait, I didn't see that. Okay, so I hear no. Thank you. So EPA number 6, repairing simple skin incisions or lacerations. You need 1 observation. Now this is a bit confusing because it says here collect 1 observation. Wound must be at least 5 centimeters long, but then on the line above you see that you can specify the length of the wound, but you need a 5 centimeter wound. So this could be done on maybe on the plastics rotation, but certainly not limited to that. I think anytime you close an incision with sutures, I don't think that clips apply, but sutures would be useful. So this could be done in an ER rotation, maybe in the ICU, but probably not that frequently. Surgical rotations where there are incisions that you close with stitches. Breast surgery, often, breast surgeons will often close incisions with sutures and not with clips. So you only need 1 of this. I don't think it should be difficult to achieve this. EPA number 7, managing tubes, drain, and central lines. So this is managing, not inserting. So, and tubes can be NG tubes, JPs that we insert at surgery, chest tubes, feeding tubes, Foley catheters, central venous catheters. There's lots of opportunities to manage these on trauma, in the ICU, and certainly on the general surgical floor and other subsurgical subspecialties in surgery. So 1 observation should be easy to do. It could be as easy as dealing with a blocked central venous line or a blocked Foley, or an NG tube that's not draining anymore, any kind of issues like that. So that's it for the transition to discipline EPAs. Any questions about them? I think what every resident should do, so in previous years, what was done is that everybody, we would all sit together, and at the end of the session, you would have a plan. So you have your schedule with all your rotations, and then write each EPA in the rotation during which it can be achieved. We're not doing this now because it's a little bit more difficult to do in this format, but what I did is I created an Excel spreadsheet with each EPA and the rotations on which it could be easily filled out. So once I figure out how to get this off the PC and into my Apple devices, I can send this to you guys. And then what I encourage you to do is to make your own Excel spreadsheet with your rotations and write in all the EPAs. You're not going to aim to do 5 observations of an EPA in 1 rotation, unless it's the only one where you can do it, but that's not going to happen. So I think you need to spread them out, but I think it's important to stick to the plan because it's so easy to fall behind, and a lot of your colleagues in ahead of you have fallen behind. I know it's maybe intimidating, difficult to ask someone to fill out an EPA. Surgical Foundations has had to deal with the EPAs. This is the third year. So it's something that a lot of attendings are used to. And in other programs, for example, ortho, I know that they're starting this year with EPAs. So more and more attendings are being sensitized to the need to do EPAs. I don't think that most of us like them. It's something that we have to do and they're gonna grow on us. But it is part of our duty as teachers to do this and to help you. So I know it's very intimidating, but you have to try to deal with, not deal with it, but just don't be so intimidated. It's easy for me to say, but I just want to encourage you to reach out and try to do these because they're necessary. And the onus is on you guys to ask for these to be filled out. And that's a big, it's not a burden, but it's a responsibility. And so I encourage you to do it. So if we look at the EPAs, the foundations of discipline, these are, you can certainly start to get these filled out in the first 4 months. There can be overlap. These will take longer to complete because there are more of these. For each one, there are several observations that need to be collected. And you'll have up to 2 years to finish them in your first 2 years. So that does give you a lot of time. So the first one is providing initial management for critically ill surgical patients. So it's a little bit like the first one we saw, but the first one was recognizing and assessing and initiating management of a critically ill patient. This is providing initial management. So this one is there's a little bit more expectation here that you will take this further. And there are 2 parts to this. One is assessing a patient, so a direct or indirect observation by a supervisor. And you see here the clinical presentations where that are acceptable for this EPA. You need 3 observations of this, so 3 times with at least 2 different presentations. So they can't all be hypotension or airway. There has to be some variety. For part B, it's a procedure. So this is where you're gonna do something. So either a needle thoracostomy, it's very rare that you have to do that. That's for tension pneumothorax where the patient's very hypotensive and you just put an angiocath in the upper anterior chest wall to relieve the hypotension quickly, to relieve the pneumothorax that's causing the hypotension. Tube thoracostomy, that's a chest tube. Central line insertion should be easy to achieve. Surgical airway, that's cricothyroidotomy or tracheostomy. That is also very rare. So you don't need to achieve a minimum of 1 of each or anything like that. For all I know, they can all be 4 central line insertions. No, sorry. I'm saying the opposite of what's written here, but I can tell you that at the competence committee, we don't expect everybody to do a needle, to do a tracheostomy and a needle thoracostomy. We don't have enough opportunities clinically to do that. So you do what you can here. We need 4 observations, and some of them can be done in a simulation facility. So this is one where I have to find out if you can bring this form and get it filled out during the ATLS course. The next one is the initial management for trauma patients. And here, the part A, this also has 2 parts. Part A is the ATLS certification. So this is easy. It will be done for most of you, I believe, by the end of August. The second part is patient assessment. So you need either primary or secondary survey. So you need 1 of each. This is what you need to do on the trauma rotation. And this one is number 2. So it can be done in simulation. But you have to, it's going to be difficult if you do your trauma rotation and you don't get this filled out to rely on simulation because I don't know when that's going to be arranged. So I really encourage you very strongly to not let the trauma rotation go by without doing this EPA. You will be doing lots of primary and secondary surveys, and your R3 or R4 or R5 can fill out this form. So it should not be difficult to do this. For number 3. So now we're getting into the surgical EPAs. Assessing and performing risk optimization for pre-op patients in preparation for surgery. So obviously this is done on rotations where there's going to be surgery, any kind of surgery. And you need 4 observations. You need at least 1 elective, 1 urgent surgery, 1 high risk, 1 critically ill patient, and at least 2 assessors. So you see there's a variety here. You can't assess 4 pre-op lap choles and get done with it. There needs to be different situations. So this is how, when you map your EPAs to the rotations you want to do them in, I think you need to look at this and put them in the right place so that going forward, you don't have to worry. And if you do it when it's supposed to be done, then it's done. You don't have to worry that you'll miss the opportunity to do it later. The next one is patient education and informed consent in preparation for surgical care. So this has to do with consenting patients for surgery. And you need 3 observations, 2 different assessors, 1 emergency, 1 elective, and in 2 different, at least 2 in clinical settings, so it can be done in simulation as well. So this is pre-oping a patient and obtaining informed consent. Not pre-oping, but discussing the surgery with the patient, so patient education, what are the risks of the procedure, what to expect before and after, and getting informed consent, so discussing the risks and the potential complications. EPA number 5. This has to do with demonstrating fundamental aspects of surgical procedures. So this is a little bit similar to the next EPA, where you demonstrate participating in a surgical procedure. This is the more basic version of functioning in the OR, basically. So this cannot be done in simulation. It has to be done anywhere where you go to the operating room or in the emergency room where you're doing a procedure like suturing and laceration. You could use, for example, you could use the scenario of a patient with a large laceration to complete this EPA and the one for the surgical incision, because you're assessing different aspects of the clinical encounter, so it is very appropriate. So obviously, this one could be done on any surgical rotation, trauma rotation, if you find the right opportunity. The ICU, probably not. So you need at least 2 faculty, 2 types of procedures, 2 assessors. Then there's the part B, which is a little bit more onerous. It requires a little bit more work, and that's what some of your colleagues have had a hard time doing. So it assesses how you participate in a team. So this is a team in the OR, and you need feedback from multiple observers. And you can see here, collect feedback from at least 6 observers, at least 1 surgeon, nurse, and anesthetist. So you can use 2 clinical encounters. So 2 operations. For each operation, you ask the surgeon to fill out a form, the nurse, and the anesthetist. And it is an OR where you're gonna be more vocal and participate more. So it should be an easy case to do, a simpler case. You should do maybe the draping, discuss with the nurse materials or tools you're gonna use, and participate in the surgical timeout. I think most of you are familiar with it. We do the timeout to discuss characteristics of each patient. So I think if you participate in that, then everybody can assess you better, can have more to assess. So you only need 2 ORs, two cases to do. It can be in the same day. You can ask the same people, but bring the printed papers for the nursing anesthetist. You can also ask the respiratory therapist who assists the anesthetist. So that's that. And then,
so excuse me.
Yeah.
So the nurse, the nurses has access to this forms?
No, they don't have access. That's why I'm saying that you should print them out and bring them for them to fill out. Nurses don't have access to 145. Anesthetists may, because they have to use this for their own residents, but I don't know if CBME or competence by design, I don't know if it's been implemented in anesthesia. So I don't know if the anesthetists have 145, and if they do, I don't know if they can assess someone who's not in anesthesia or someone who's not on their rotation, because you're gonna get this done by anesthesia from the role of a surgeon. So you're gonna be on a surgeon.
Can I say something? Hello?
Yeah.
Dr. Gitulescu?
Yes.
Anesthesia, they do have, they've transitioned, so they have access.
But can they see trainees who are not under rotation or in their program?
I think they can access anything on 145 because I think so. But look, I can ask. I can double check if you want.
I think we need to let our residents know. So the question is, let's say there's a resident on urology who's going to the OR, and the anesthetist needs will be asked to complete the form. The question is, can they do it electronically? Now, there are lots of computers in the OR, so they could access computers there, although maybe they would prefer to have a paper form. I know we're trying to move away from paper, so we have to see how it works. But nurses don't have access to 145, correct? Fernanda?
No, not at all. Not at all. It's just the attendings and senior residents.
Okay.
None of that's in the programs of the team-based approach. You know, nurses, physios, whatever. No, not at all.
So for them, we have to print the forms. Okay. All right. Is this clear for everybody? Okay, so EPA number 6, participating surgical procedures. So here you are doing more. This is where it's what you do technically in the OR. It's not before the case, after the case, and during the case. It doesn't have anything to do with communicating with, or not much to do with communicating with other members of the team. This is about how you hold the instruments, how you assist the surgeon or whoever is doing the case, how you manage things, technical skills, and knowledge about the surgery. So you need 4 observations, different types of procedures, different assessors, at least 2 by faculty. So you could ask the senior resident, for example, if you're closing the skin with the senior and the surgeon has stepped away already, you could ask the senior resident to fill it out. So, you know, you're gonna have lots of opportunities to do this, hopefully. EPA 7 also has 2 parts. The second part is also evaluating your role in a team, but this is not in the OR. This is managing uncomplicated post-op patients, on the surgical patients. So part A has to do with post-op management. 8 observations of achievement. So this is more work, but it has to do with how you prescribe medication, how you manage their pain, how you instruct them when they go home, how you write the exit prescriptions, things like that. The part B has to do with being part of a team. And on the surgical floors, there are multidisciplinary team meetings every week to discuss patients. Certainly that happens on the floors with heavier patients. So I know about general surgery and colorectal because that's what I do. So we have, let's say every Wednesday morning, we have a team with the physiotherapist, occupational therapist, the social worker, the dietitian. So we discuss cases and we talk about, is this patient ready to go home? No, this patient, physio says, no, they're not ready. OT says, well, we need to send someone to the house to assess if their house is safe for them to return. And a physician needs to be available during that time and to take everybody's input and to have a dialogue and a discussion. So what we're looking for here is respect for others' opinions and working in a collaborative fashion, communicating well what the concerns are from the medical perspective. So this is what we're looking for here, and you need non-physicians to fill out these forms. It says here at least 2 different roles. So it could be your attending who sits with you at this meeting and watches you discuss at least 1 patient. It could be the nurse in charge. It could be the physiotherapist, whoever you think has a good idea of how you did, whoever you've interacted with a lot or has observed you a lot. And again, this is one EPA where in previous years it's been more difficult to achieve because you need to bring a form, because you need to make the time to participate in this kind of meeting. And it doesn't have to be a formal meeting. It could be a particularly difficult patient that you've discussed extensively with a physio or with a social worker. But it's something that you have to keep in mind. It's not like, okay, I'm going to show up to work and I'm operating, so I'll just send an EPA about participating in a surgical procedure. This requires more planning and more work. So please don't let it fall behind in this. EPA number 8, managing post-op patients with complications, and you need 8 observations of achievement. This also should be easily doable on surgical floors. The trauma rotation, you could do it. There will be, I'm sure, lots of complicated patients. So if you find someone who has the time to do it, that's great. But on the surgical floors, I think it's easily manageable. And the last EPA has to do supervising junior learners. You need at least 6 observations, 3 different junior learners. So they could be, I think as an R1, another R1 is not a junior learner. I think it's a medical student, but you can do it in your PGY2 year where you can ask, you can observe an R1. Fernanda, am I correct that the junior learners can fill out this?
No.
Okay.
Typically, it's been seniors can assess juniors, but no, unless not in EPAs, juniors can't assess. In other assessments, perhaps, but no.
Not here. I find this misleading because it says assessor's role, junior learner, senior resident faculty. So that's what I found misleading. So I think it's important to clarify. So R3s, 4 and 5s need to observe you supervise a junior learner. So you could take a medical student through closing an incision, for example, or placing an NG, or doing some procedure that they would be allowed to do, or reviewing a consult with a medical student and giving them feedback. I think that's appropriate, right, Fernanda?
I'm going to have to review this because we were given a rule, which is only seniors can assess in EPAs. So I'm going to ask about this, Dr. Vitalescu, because quite honestly, I don't want to say the wrong thing, especially to 29 residents, you know, so,
yeah.
And actually we're having a CBD team meeting tomorrow morning. So I'll put this on our agenda to clarify with Carlos. And if we're not sure, we'll ask the Royal College because it is important. And you're absolutely right, this is unclear.
But I can see how we wouldn't want to put a medical student in the situation where they have to evaluate someone who's evaluating them or who's so it's not an easy situation to be in. So but the examples I gave of activities that they can supervise, I think are okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So we will get back to everybody about this. And this is the last EPA. So you've seen a lot of information. What questions do you guys have? What we can do, I don't want to give you a deadline. I don't want to do this as an assignment, but what you could do is make your Excel spreadsheet with your rotations, with your schedule, and write for each rotation which EPA you aim to achieve or how many of each. And then if you would like, you can go over that with me. We can make appointments and we can do it over Zoom or over email. Whoever wants to do that, of course, we can help you with that. Make sure that everything is understood clearly.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, what's the total amount of EPAs that we have to sell by the end of the first year or the second year, surgical foundation?
It is all the EPAs. I don't know how many EPAs. Look, there's 7 EPAs in transition to discipline, and there are 9 in foundations. But of each one, you have to do several observations. So the total number is I didn't count, 70, 80, I would say, 60, something like that. And they need to be completed by the end of the second year. So you have 2 years to do them. So, and it makes sense if you look at the progression. If you look at the EPAs, the much simpler ones are the first ones in the transition to discipline. And those you need to do 1 or 2 observations. So those should be easy to do. And there aren't so many. So that's why we ideally want them done in the first 4 months of week 4. If you want to just concentrate on those to begin with, that's fine. That's very good. So you do that. But don't forget the trauma ones, the ones that can only be done on a trauma rotation, which is only EPA 2, where you have to assess a trauma patient. You're not going to be able to do that on another rotation. I know that in the past, residents who haven't completed that had to do a night call on trauma. I would hate to have to do that. I don't think anybody wants to do that. So don't forget when you're on the trauma rotation, do all the EPAs that have to do with trauma. Is this intimidating? Or does this stress anybody? Okay, so there's a question here. If you don't rotate on trauma, do we rely on the SIM center activity? I have to admit, since I'm interim program director, I didn't realize that there's someone who doesn't rotate on trauma. So I would have to look at that and let you know. Then you have to do it in a simulation. I have to look at that and let you know what you need to do. And I'll look at the rotations for each program. General surgery at JGH. Okay, so I guess we're talking about a resident who's not in general surgery or in any program that does trauma. So I'll have to get back to you. Are there any other concerns? I know this is stressful, and I know you guys are thinking, okay, there's a lot of stuff we need to do. Can I clarify anything else? Can I make anything any easier for you guys? Okay. It may help to have an EPA map. Can you tell us what is an EPA map, please?
Yeah, this year, an EPA map is a curriculum map on an Excel spreadsheet, which is done according to its XY axis. So the Y axis is all the EPAs for, all the EPAs for the whole of the program. And then the X axis is things like sites, rotations, simulation, all the academic stuff you do, academic half days, boot camps, journal clubs, etc. And then everything is plotted. The EPAs with the bolded milestones. You don't have to do all the milestones or it's too many. The bolded milestones in the EPA Royal College forms. And then by just sort of checking off the boxes of, in which rotation there's the probability of doing an EPA, that's sort of, I can send you examples from what we've done here. We've started a whole new map format for the 2020 cohort.
For this cohort?
Yeah, because, well, things have evolved over PGME and also things have evolved with the Royal College prescriptions. When surgical foundations transitioned, there wasn't that much instruction as to what to do. But this year, the Royal College has come up with technical guides, and over the past year, I mean, I've been at McGill for 2 years, and I see that over the past year, there's been a lot more direct instruction as to how to. So I can send you some examples, and maybe we can talk. It might be useful.
Okay, so this is what I was referring to when I suggested to everyone to put their schedule on a spreadsheet and write their schedule of rotations, and for each rotation write which EPAs could be done there, or how many observations of an EPA we're going to do here and how many in the other rotations, so that you don't overwhelm yourself and you don't get to the end of the year and then, oh, I haven't done any EPAs or I missed opportunity. So that's what it is. I didn't know that this existed. So is there something done for surgical foundations? Is there a map like that specific?
You'd have a curriculum map that was done for accreditation. So there's that, but that's not done in the EPA format. But what we can do is I'll get your curriculum map out of the Can-Am system, and I'll have a look at it, compare it to our format, to the EPA format, and see what can be done.
And if this is sent to our residents, can they customize it? Can it be changed? Sure. Or is this, yes?
Sure.
So they don't need to create the spreadsheet. They can just use this and.
Yeah, if you'll hold off for a few days, let me explore and see what we can do, because maybe we can create a master program map that each resident can then tick off for what's relevant to them.
Yeah. Well, that's we can even do that because we know all the rotations that our residents are rotating on. So that's kind of what I did actually with the EPAs.
It's totally logical. I think it's the
Yeah.
way to do it. Completely logical. But I mean, see, Surgical Foundations transitioned early. So you've been, you know, sort of kind of almost guinea pigged into CBD, you know, in the early, and it's been complicated.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, sorry.
The competence committee knows very well how complicated it is to keep track of everything.
No, but at PGME, Carlos and I, we live to serve, so we'll help you, you know.
For our residents, it's difficult to keep track of what to do when and what has been done. And for our administrators and the physicians on the competence committee who also have to keep track, it's complicated to keep track of what's been done with passing grade, what the comments are and everything. It's been hard. So I'm not saying this to you guys to complain. I'm saying this to you guys to commiserate with you because it was rolled out, I think, without the appropriate digital support. 145 is evolving. It got better, and apparently there's a better version coming. But until then, we have to do with what we have.
That's right. The app is coming. We've put the pressure, or Dr. Hughes has put quite a lot of pressure on 145. We're a big client. So coming up with a very good app that'll be very user-friendly and can be done anywhere, on your phone, on your tablet, wherever, hopefully.
Okay. So unless someone else has any questions, this is my plan. I'm going to get Sheila to send you the PDF version of the EPA descriptions, the document that I shared with you on screen now. I'm going to send you the Excel spreadsheet that I created that lists each EPA and which rotations it's best accomplished on. And then Dr. Claudio will look at the maps that she has and see what she can send us. And when you have all this, you can hopefully create your own map, customized to your schedule. And whoever wants to review this with myself, it'll be my pleasure. We can do it on the phone, via Zoom, if you're at the Jewish in person, whichever way you like. I will leave it up to you. I will have a bit of more free time the week of August 17th, so that gives you a couple of weeks to wrap your heads around this and reach out to me if you would like to review it. So there's one other comment here. Let's see. The document is available. Sheila, are you there? Sheila, can you tell us about this?
Oh, sorry, hang on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, the EPA document that you're referring to is on my courses under the EPA tab. The PDF is there along with all the other documents that we've discussed over the last week or so.
The description of the EPAs that I just shared with everybody is available in my courses.
It's on my courses, yes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. So does anyone have any questions or anything else we can clarify or help with?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
Regarding the paper-filled EPAs, to whom shall we return it to? And shall we give them the same PDF papers that you showed with your screen, or is just like a different one with something they can tick, or they have like a specific format?
Okay, so what I showed you is the description of the EPAs. What you need to print out is the evaluation form. And that's from 145, right, Dr. Claudio? Yeah, and that's printable, right? They should be able to print. So we're asking you to print these forms. You only need a few observations of these EPAs, so it's not a lot of paper to print. Is there anything to do, Sheila, if someone doesn't have access to a printer? Can we do anything? I know you're not working in the hospital, so how can we get around this?
Honestly, as many as possible have to be done online.
Yes.
To limit the papers. There are cases where papers will be used, but the majority really have to be online. Those are the instructions.
Yeah. But I'm talking about the EPA, the observations, the evaluations that need to be filled out by nurses in the OR. Nurses don't have access to 145. So
no, but a lot of the time the services have 360 evaluations. So there's somebody usually from every service that has access to 145. So the nurses, this is where the issue is. We're trying to get a list of who is the 360 evaluator, because there's some services, like I know for cardiac, there is one doctor. So all the nurses bring the evaluation, the paper evaluations to this one doctor, and then he evaluates them all, and then he or she will enter them into the system. They're referred to as 360 evaluators, but we don't have a list of, it's kind of a missing link. We don't have the list of who these people are.
Okay, but so if a nurse comes and gives me feedback on a resident, if I enter the EPA, it's under my name.
Yes.
So isn't that misleading then?
I'm not sure how it works. I know there's some services that there is one person responsible to receive all the feedback. I know, for example, last year when we received all the paper EPAs and we entered them in the comments section, we would write, we did them all in Dr. Vasilio's name last year, and in the comment section we would write originally done by Dr. X, original paper format kept in Christie's office at the general. The problem with entering paper EPAs is quite often they don't appear on the 145 report.
Right.
So that's where I'm not sure if that's changed since, the last couple of months. I know with the competence committee, there was a couple of issues with that where it would show residents missing EPAs when they actually had done them, but they weren't done on paper.
Okay. Now, if a resident operates in the OR, and in the OR that we need an evaluation done by an anesthetist, and one done by a nurse, and one done by a surgeon, can the surgeon fill out one EPA after discussing with these other two individuals, and then it counts as 3 observations? Would you be able, if we put that in the comments, then would you be able to see that when you count, when you tabulate?
Unfortunately, that's over my 145
so we don't know.
Knowledge. We don't know. Unless Dr. Claudio maybe knows.
No. Well, if the EPA prescribes a certain number of observations, they have to be documented.
They have to be documented. So 145 needs to see 6 observations. If it requires 6,
then it'll have to document one, one form for each.
One form for each.
Yeah.
But if a nurse does not have access to 145, how is the nurse to do that? That's the question of Jean-Francois.
Yeah, well, I'm noting this down because this has come up a bit, but a lot of programs, it's not an issue because there's no nurses evaluating, but in yours and PEDS, that kind of thing, sure. So I'm going to bring it up again at our meeting tomorrow, see what comes of it, and I'll get back to you with a few things, Dr. Gitlesto, maybe toward the end of the week, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I don't think it's urgent. I don't think anybody's going to run out and start doing this now. We have the transition to discipline to do first. So, okay, so we'll get back to everybody about this as well. I apologize for this. It's a new thing, this EPA thing. Still, after 2 years, it's still new.
Yep.
Okay. Any other good questions out there? Okay. Then I thank you all for being here. I'm very happy that so many of you are here. That's wonderful. And I hope that your year goes well, your first rotation on call and all that. I hope you have fun, first of all, and I hope that you do well. And please let us know in whichever way you want. Please reach out to us if there's anything we can do. Sometimes if you let us know too late, we can't change anything. And other times you just don't know when we're able to help. So don't think it's not a solvable problem. Just reach out to somebody and let us know. So thank you again. Thank you, Dr. Claudio. Thank you, Sheila. And we'll see you next time. Goodbye.